You're welcome to the Thriving in the NHS Monthly Huddle. My name is Ibifunke Kwegbaotemolu, and I'm the host of the Thriving in the NHS Huddles. I've got with me this morning Mr. Daniel. He's a surgeon, an ENT pediatric surgeon. He's also a career coach and has spent lots of time in education and support for NHS staff. So today we're looking forward to gaining a lot of wisdom from him on how to plan our careers. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so we've got 11 people who are here. We're going to launch a poll just now because we want to know who's here and we want to make sure that we pitch the information at the right level so that it feeds into what you need to hear this morning. So if you could just take time to complete the poll. I'm launching it now. And we'll probably leave it on for a few minutes whilst others join, because I realize it's just 10:31. So we'll give people a couple of minutes to remember that they signed up. So can I ask, Mr. McDaniel, while people are filling the form, at what point did you know you wanted to be a surgeon?
Oh, that's a great question. It's probably, for me, I think it's been more of a journey rather than a point. And if I think at medical school, I probably realized that I was interested in the kind of things that have relatively quick fixes, sort of the kind of stuff where a patient comes in, you do something about it, and then they walk out, and they're better. And that kind of always appealed to me in the medical side much more than that sort of kind of longer term chronic disease management. So that kind of was my starting point. So I probably gravitated towards things that were the kind of the short-term relationships rather than the long-term relationships for the most part.
That sounds like most people that pick surgery.
Maybe. And then I did my sort of first F1 equivalent or sort of house officer job as it was in those days. And I picked a job that rotated. It was 3 months in the professorial surgery unit and 3 months in ENT. And I kind of thought there was lower GI, and I thought it was working for the professor of surgery. And I thought, wow, this was going to be amazing. And I thought, well, ENT is just like, it just comes with the job. And I absolutely hated the general surgery job. And I kind of rotated through ENT, which was, sort of a bolt on. And I thought, wow, this is good. And actually for me, it was because quite early on in ENT, I was doing stuff. I was treating and discharging patients. And largely for me, it felt like somewhere where I belonged. It kind of felt like there were people like me. They shared my values, sort of we laughed at the same thing. We liked the same patients. And again, I think that's quite common, isn't it? We gravitate to other people that are like us. So I did that, and then I did a core surgical training equivalent, and I made sure that I had ENT in that. And in my days, that was a 3-year rotation. And then I came back to ENT then as an SHO, and I kind of thought, yes, I'm really enjoying that. And then I decided to stay in ENT. So that kind of how I ended up in ENT, and then how I ended up in the pediatric ENT was, of course, I did ENT in general, but I quite enjoyed it. I did pediatric surgery as part of my surgical training, and I enjoy that, and I enjoyed pediatrics before, so I kind of always gravitated to children. So I think that's kind of how I ended up doing children. And sort of weirdly, I kind of said that I enjoy that very transactional short-term relationships, but kind of what I found that when I became a consultant, that I then missed that really deep connection that those people that are in the kind of long-term relationship medicine have, which, in surgery, largely, I probably haven't got that. I mean, I do have some patients that I have that relationship with, but majority of the work that I do is kind of, in and out. So I found I actually quite missed those long-term deep relationships and connections. And that's probably one of the reasons why I've ended up going into kind of coaching, leadership, education, because that is where I have those longer term deep relationships.
That is good. It's good that we've come to that. So can you talk to us a bit more about that role, what that role looks like for you. Suppose there's someone here who is thinking about it. What are the things that you found in that role that you really enjoy, and what was your journey into that role?
You mean my kind of coaching leadership?
Yes, yeah.
I think, for me, it kind of started off I guess I'm interested in making a difference to others, yeah, and I think most people that do healthcare will have a version of that, of helping people or whatever, kind of that. Probably most of us will have that within us. And one of the things that I found with my clinical career, being focused purely on clinical career, is kind of, that's fine, and you gradually get more and more senior, and then you reach a point where you realize that actually, if you're really going to want to make a difference, you need to be making a difference to the whole system. And, as frontline doctors, we're making a difference to the person that sits in front of us, or at least, I as an ENT surgeon do. Maybe if somebody, I'm thinking maybe public health or occupational health, or, maybe A&E, there might be things that a doctor does that is much more based around system. But if I think, my practice as an ENT surgeon, if I kind of think, taking tonsils out, that makes a difference to the one person in front of me. And one of the things that I realized was that actually, in order for me to make a really big difference, I need to think beyond the one patient in front of me. And I enjoy treating the one patient in front of me, or helping the one trainee in front of me. But if I really want to make a difference that is bigger, then that means having to work at the level of the whole system, or having to work at level of population, whatever that might be. And I think that's kind of why I then sort of thought, okay, what can I do that is working beyond just the one patient in front of me? And how I got into coaching, I had coaching myself when I was making some career decisions, and I found it really beneficial, and kind of it's always stuck with me. And I've always done lots of education, and coaching kind of just seemed the natural addition to my skill set, in order to try and help not just the one person, but also work at kind of system level, to make a difference to more than the one person in front of me. And I think that's the kind of, I think a lot of doctors struggle with that, because, naturally we treat the one patient in front of us, which is great and very rewarding, and we get that instant reward and recognition. But I think a lot of people get frustrated because, we talk about the system, and the system's broken, and the system this and the system that. And the reality is that, all of us are the system. All of us that are here today, we are the system. So when we talk about the system, what we're talking about is ourselves and each other. And maybe, one of the things that I perhaps realized is that and don't get me wrong, I'm perfectly capable of moaning just as well as everybody else. Yeah. So, and I do a large amount of that. Actually, sort of one of the things I realized was that really, the system is us. And if things are to change, it's up to us to change it. We can't sort of wish for the different government or different taxpayers or whatever. The system is us. If we're going to change it, it's up to us to change it. And and some of you on here will write articles and influence social media. Some of you will go into politics. Some of you will be chief execs. Some of you will be medical directors. Sort of some of you will be organizing, podcasts and webinars, and, everybody does different things, but it is up to us to change the system, because the system is us.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's actually a good point to start and break. So we've got results in from the poll. We've got 24 people in, about 20 of them, or 19 have responded. So majority of people are junior doctors. We've got a few middle grade, so 26% middle grade. We've got SAS representation 5% and 5% post-CCT GP or consultants. Majority of people have been in the UK for less than 3 years. 18% have been here for 3 to 5 years, and another 12% have been here for more than 5 years. I'm just going to see if we can see the details of people's specialties, because I think that might help as well. If that doesn't work, then okay, that's fine. That's not working very quickly just now, so we will come back to that at some point. Okay, so my first question was going to be, what is a career? Like, when you think about your career, especially if you're a junior doctor, what are the things that you would say someone should think about when they think my career? What thoughts should they have?
So for me, a career is an ever-changing, lifelong endeavor, and career isn't just paid work. You know, career is everything that one does in the world of work, and some of that will be paid, and some of that will be unpaid. So, and I guess there's kind of three things for me. So the first thing is that it is a lifelong endeavor, and often people think of, you know, what's my next step or what do I need to achieve, and I think that's problematic. The challenge for us as doctors is that you know, all of us have fixed mindset, and what I mean by that is we go from one tick box to the next. Yeah, we are selected for our ability to pass exam and tick boxes. We're promoted on our ability to tick boxes. You know, we're appraised on our ability to tick boxes. So we are professional box tickers. We are brilliant at ticking boxes because that is what we need to do in order to progress our careers. But the problem with that is that creates a mindset where all of the time we're thinking, what's my next box to tick? What's my next box? I've ticked this box. I've ticked that box. Okay. So, and, you know, for me, it's less about, you know, what do I need to get to, because you know, it's a lifelong journey. And if I kind of give my example is, you know, maybe for me, when I became a consultant, I kind of worked towards that, and I thought this is what I need to do. And then I became a consultant, and I thought, now what? Yeah, you know, I've got another 25 years of work ahead of me. I'm a consultant, or, you know, I'm a GP. You know, where do I go next? And I think that's quite common, that, you know, people climb the ladder and they get to the top of the ladder, whatever top looks like for them. And then they sort of say, where do I go next? Because they haven't really considered a career as a lifelong endeavor. So for me, you know, yes, the next step is important. I'm not suggesting that it's not. You know, it is important to focus on the next step. But actually, you know, it's important for me to think about the long term and the long journey. And the key thing really to recognizing there would be some key things that you want to have in your life. And, you know, these might be kind of values, things that are important to you, and if you recognize, sort of say, you know, these are 5, 6, 7 things that I want in my life, you know, always and in the long term, then that's something that is really important, because that then helps you determine where's my career going. So you don't need sort of a fixed point. You don't need necessarily a goal to aim. Having some goals along the ways, that's helpful. I'm not saying it's not, but you don't focus just on the next job or just on the goal. I think what for me is much more important is recognizing that this is a lifelong endeavor, and it's thinking, okay, what's my life about? What do I want? What do I want people to say about me when I retire? What legacy do I want to leave behind? So that kind of big picture thing. And then sort of once you recognize this is the broad direction, then you can sort of say, well, this is the thing, these are the small things, these are the small goals that I need to do. So that kind of long-term thinking would be an important thing for me. The other thing is that it's ever changing. And one of the challenge of making career decisions, particularly in the long term, is that people are making career decisions based on the information that is available today, and even if somebody and it's impossible to have all the information available. Yeah. So, you know, if any of you there sort of are foundation doctors thinking, oh, you know, I want to be a pediatric airway surgeon too. The reality is that as a foundation doctor, you cannot possibly have and assimilate all of the information about what's it like to be a consultant, because there's so much information out there. And until you are in that role, you can't possibly know what it's like. So all the time we're making decisions with limited information. Problem number one. And problem number two, in 10 years time, when you do become a pediatric airway consultant, it'll all be changed. The system will be different. You know, who knows if NHS will exist? So things are always changing. So for me, and, you know, that's just how life is, isn't it? And for me, it's kind of about accepting that things are always changing. But the key, I think, when it comes to career management is positioning yourself so that you are in a position of strength. And particularly that for me would be around having a track record of achievements, and upskilling yourself. Yeah. And, upskilling that might be, doing projects, or it might be shadowing, doing committees, sitting, putting your hand up to committees, doing projects, writing papers, or that might be sort of going and doing postgraduate certificates, courses, degrees, sort of, it can be anything, by gaining experience, gaining education. Because if that means when the world changes, if you have a track record of achievement over here, it's easy to then transfer that over here when the world changes. If you have a set of qualifications, it's easy to look for generalizability of things. Yeah. So build a track record of achievement, upskill yourself, develop yourself, because the world will change. And, if you have a track record of achievement, and if you're highly skilled and highly thought of, when the world changes, you're going to be well positioned to take advantage of whatever the change might happen. And the third thing that I talked about in that, what a career is the idea that not everything that we do is going to be paid for. And I think the challenge is that sort of when people think that everything I do, I need to be remunerated for. And I think, that's kind of becomes problematic, because the reality is that a lot of the time, many of us do stuff for free, hours and hours and hours of free stuff. And sometimes, that leads to something that becomes financially beneficial, and sometimes it doesn't. And, and that's okay. But for me, doing the stuff for free, number one, that's investing in myself. Yeah. Because, if I do stuff for free, that's investing in myself, but that's also me investing in others. And if we are here because we want to make a difference to other people, if we are doing stuff for free, well, we're investing in ourselves, and we're making a difference to other people. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that people do all the work for free, because, of course, we all have to eat, and we all have to have our mortgages. So I do think that by and large, people need to be paid for what they deliver. But equally, I would say don't be afraid to do stuff for free, because it's quite common that you end up doing stuff where you're not getting paid for. But in the long term, that'll lead to advantages. And again, sort of maybe if I think of some specific examples, for me, I did a lot of undergraduate medical education as a relatively junior consultant and as a senior trainee, and I shadowed the professor who was in charge, and I didn't get paid for any of that. But I did OSCEs, I wrote MCQs, I wrote educational materials. I enjoyed doing it, yeah, and that meant I was building myself up, I was upskilling myself, I was building a track record, I was helping students, and I was helping the professor. And for a number of years, that led to no financial benefit. But then when the professor retired, I was the obvious person to take that role on, because I'd already been doing it. I already knew what was involved. And the reality is that if a stranger had come in, they wouldn't know what the role involves. They haven't done it. Whereas I'd already been doing it for, I'm going to say, I don't know, probably 7 years before I actually got the paid job. Yeah. So I do get paid for that job now, sort of, which is great. But I got that job because I invested and I did it for free. So, it did lead to financial benefit. So don't be afraid to do stuff that doesn't have any obvious financial benefit. As long as it's something that aligns with your broad career direction. Yeah. So for me, I did it for free because I knew that I was interested in medical education. Yeah. If somebody had sort of asked me, I don't know, would you trying to think what I might not be interested, would you do clinical governance for free for 7 years? And I kind of sort of said, well, that's not where my career is going. So no, I wouldn't do that, because my career direction was developing others. So medical education, that sits well. But if somebody says, do you want to do a stack of clinical governance for free for 7 years? And I'm kind of thinking, well, it doesn't really align with my career. So that's kind of how I would think of the stuff that you do for free or not. Does it align with your broad career direction? If it does align with your career directions, then yes, do it. If it doesn't align with your career direction, then unless you need it to build your CV, probably not.
Okay. So I think one of the key things you've talked about, without actually saying those words, is having some clarity about the direction you want to go in. So what your interests are, and making sure that what you're filling your basket with, so your upskilling and your positioning of yourself, is aligned with those things that you're interested in and you see yourself doing in the long run. Yeah. That's really good. That's really good. I've been taking notes. That's really good. Thank you. So another question I would like to ask is, you talked about the point where you needed coaching yourself.
Yeah.
How did you recognize that a coach coming into your decision making was something that was important, and how did you access that?
So again, it was it wasn't a single point. It was a journey, and I think for me, I think actually sort of several things fed into it. So the first thing is that I was a relatively new consultant, and up to that stage, I was very much focused on I need to become a consultant, and I became a consultant, and then I kind of thought, what else? Where do I go next? Yeah. So that was kind of one aspect. So I had major health problems, and that kind of also made me think sort of okay, and probably made me realize that I'm not going to be alive forever. And I kind of thought, okay, so I need to think, I can't carry on as I am. So I thought I need to think about I'm not going to be here forever, and I think also a general sort of maybe kind of probably a bit burnout and frustration sort of at work in the sense that I was doing good things at helping the one person in front of me, but I was frustrated with the system that I talked about in the beginning, and that was before I realized how much influence I have, because I kind of felt that the system was doing all of these things to me, and I was frustrated. So and I kind of thought, well, where's my career going? What am I doing next? And then, I Googled, and I identified a coach that specialized in coaching doctors. For me, it wasn't about. I was interested in where my career was going. Yeah, so it wasn't so much about. I didn't see coaching for my mental health and well-being, although I sort of have had therapy for my mental health separately from coaching, but the coaching particularly was to really to look where my career decisions going, and I knew what is my career in medicine look like, and I think I sort of sought a coach out for that, and then and I found it really beneficial. Sort of we worked out a whole we did exercises, and that kind of gave me clarity, and much of the benefits of coaching happens outside of the 1 hour or the 1.5 hour that you end up with the coach. But for me, it kind of probably ended up being a process of over a year or so, where I gradually sort of got clearer as to what my direction would be. And for me, one of the things that I identified, for me, my direction was going to be around developing people. Yeah, and that developing people, that's a golden thread that has run through my career the rest of the time. Yeah, so that's not a job title. Yeah, it's not a degree to do, it's not a promotion to aim for. So for me, it's guiding light for my career, if you like. Yeah, so that's why I talked about, it's not job title or a particular promotion, but it's a guiding light. Yeah, and then I knew, okay, this is the guiding light, in my case, developing people, and then it was around sort of saying, okay, what are the opportunities, what roles exist, what jobs exist, how can I upskill myself in those fields, and then I did that. If I kind of think from, that's my personal experience. If I think of my experience of working with other people, there's a variety of different things that kind of comes into what that guiding principle, and and it may be something like, in my case, that it might be developing people. For a lot of other people, and it depends on where in your career you are. Yeah, so for a lot of other people, a guiding principle might be, sort of balance. I want balance in my life. If I've got a family, I've got children, I've whatever, elderly parents, whatever it might be, caring responsibility, I want that to balance with my career, and that becomes a guiding principle. Yeah, and of course, that kind of is going to look different to what mine might look like. Yeah, because for me, if I'm doing this on a Saturday, that's okay, because my guiding principle is developing others, and this is developing others. Yeah, if your guiding life is balance, then you need sort of really good boundaries around your career, which is that on Saturdays you spend with your family, or you have every Wednesday off to spend with your family. So it might be that, and for everybody is different, every individual is different, but I think for me it was that where's my life going, where's my career going, that kind of big picture stuff. It also changes. yeah, because over lifetime, because maybe I'm 50 and I had coaching when I was 40 or in my early 40s, and and I talk about where's my life going, where's my legacy, and people in your audience that are 22, 23 are going to think like, I don't know where my life's going. I just want my next job. Yeah. So it changes. Yeah. So if I kind of think with people that I work with that are early on in their careers, often it's around which specialty. Yeah. But the key for me in the specialty is that what you're going to be doing as a doctor, that's a tiny proportion of your career. Yeah. Because, are you going to be taking out tonsils, or are you going to be prescribing drugs? Are you going to be doing OGDs? Are you going to be sort of taking mental health histories? That's what you actually do as a doctor with the patient. That's tiny, yeah. Because, the really, really big stuff is what kind of team are you part of? What are your working hours? What's the organization you like? What kind of organizations you're going to work with? What hours are you going to work? How much out of hours commitment is going to be? Are you going to get called in at weekends? Do you work by yourself? Do you work as part of a team? What kind of a team? Are you part of a doctors? Are you part of multidisciplinary teams? And for me, actually, those kind of questions are probably really, really, really important. And and I don't think that people always think of those things, yeah, because people always sort of think, do I want to be taking out tonsils? Do I want to be prescribing statins? Do I want to be talking to depressed people, for example? And people sort of say, well, I don't know which of these three do I want to do, yeah. But like that's taking out tonsils. That's a tiny, tiny bit of what I do. A career is so much more than what you actually do in that patient interaction, yeah. So for people that are early on in their careers, I would sort of kind of say, if you're trying to make a decision about which specialty you go to, or which hospital you go to, or do you progress, do you go for this job, do you go for the other job, it's for me, it would be always thinking about what's the big picture, what's the job like, not what am I going to be doing with the patient, but what's the whole job like. I think that for me would be important. And remember also that things change over time, yeah. Because if you'd invited me on this sort of 20 years ago, and all I would have talked about would be, it's really important to do research. I'm so proud that I'm doing this research, and I'm hoping to do that. I'm applying for grants, etc. I've talked about none of that so far, because people's life changes, and that's also okay, because we all change. And one of the things that I often hear is people want lots of things, yeah. So people want their weekends off, and they want a family, and they want to be a senior leader, and they want to do postgraduate exams, and they want to do research papers, and they want to be head of clinical governance. And I kind of sort of thinking, well, you've only got so much time, yeah. And people get stuck because there's so many things that they want to do, but there's only a limited amount of time, yeah. And what needs to happen then is a reality check and some prioritization. Okay, which things do you want to do? And one of the concepts that I really like, and I got sort of that from one of the guests on my podcast, was the idea that you can do all of these things, just not at the same time, yeah. So for these 3 months, you've got an exam coming up, forget your family, you're going to focus on exam. After you've done exam, that you're not going to have to work very much on that. So for the next 3 months, prioritize your family, your health, your well-being, and forget about revision, because you're not going to have to do anything for 3 months, yeah. Or this job is going to be really busy, I'm going to be new in a role for the first 3 months, I'm going to really have to work very hard, so just accept that for the next 3 months your career takes priority, and your exercise might take a bit of a backseat, but then recognize that actually in 3 months time you're going to dial down your career prioritization, and you're going to dial up your exercise, or your well-being, or whatever it might be, so that all the time we're kind of adjusting. So all of us want everything and all of these things, but you can't have them at the same time. So you can do them sequentially, or you can kind of dial them up and down month by month, week by week, yeah. And that's one way that you can try and squeeze everything into your life.
That's very helpful. Definitely sounds like something I'm going to try. So one of the things that I've found, and one of the reasons I do this, is because I realize that the journey for international medical graduates is different.
Yeah.
And what's very interesting about that journey is that it doesn't matter where the international medical graduate is from, which is where I think that there might be opportunities to change the system, because we get treated in a way that makes life creates unique challenges for us. So thinking about the careers, one of the things in the system is, so we can't have, we can't just do jobs we like or stay at jobs we like or things like that. Your jobs are tied into your visas, such that you may lose a job you like just because somebody is not willing to extend your visa, or you may not be able to switch roles because you can't get a visa in the role you want and things like that. So lots of our career decisions are bound by these thoughts. People rush into GP training, I think, sometimes because I got advice that way, so I assume that's the way people think about things. It's just go do GP training, you'll get a visa, you'll have visa security for 3 years, you don't have to worry about all these job things. And I worry sometimes that we lose sight of the bigger picture of the career and what your guiding lights should be. Last month, we talked about identity and purpose and why it's important. So just bringing that all together to think about the unique challenges of the IMGs, what would you recommend in terms of thinking about the career, the long term, just thinking about everything you've said, but now looking at it through the lens of an international medical graduate that has all these constraints on their decision making?
I suppose, it's not something that I necessarily know very much about. Yeah. So feel free, if you hear me making assumptions, feel free to correct me. Yeah. Sort of. So that would be the first thing to say. For me, it's interesting to hear that. Because I mean, it sounds quite rather abusive relationship between the NHS and international doctors. Okay, I say that as a white person who's a British graduate. So that's number one. And number two, for me in my department, we're desperately short of doctors. Yeah, desperately short. Is always a struggle to find people. And I think everybody else is always struggling. So it's interesting that, on one hand, we've created a system where everybody's desperate for doctors. And on the other hand, we've created a system where we don't support people well, and we don't welcome people, and we don't reward people. Yeah. So something's wrong. And actually, one of the things that I would say, to international graduates and probably to all other doctors is to recognize what you're worth. Yeah, because if I think of the doctors that are in my department, whether international or not, it's our department wouldn't function without them. Yeah, so if they left, we wouldn't be able to function them. And often those doctors that are in training roles are often quite well protected. Sort of they have well protected hours and contracts that are all nationally agreed. And so if I think, the international doctors that I know, that they're often not on sort of standard, they'll be on locally employed contracts, and I don't think anybody knows what those contracts are, or I think, they're all different, and people, as my understanding is that, people can put whatever they want into those contracts because it's not a nationally agreed contract, yeah, as far as I'm aware, yeah. But it's recognizing that actually, you really are contributing a lot to the department. Your departments are lucky to have you, and the departments probably wouldn't be able to function without you. And there's a balance to be had, yeah, because there does need to be a little bit of humility about where my role in the department is, but you can have humility and also recognizing your worth. Yeah, to me, it's quite possible for the two things to coexist. Yeah, to sort of say, I contribute to this department, I'm a valuable member of this department would struggle without me. I think it's quite possible to hold that view whilst at the same time having some humility about the fact that, maybe you're not the only person in the department, or maybe they could replace you, or somebody else could do that. So for me, one of the things that I would encourage would be, dare I say it, for the international graduates to think a bit more highly of themselves. Yeah, sort of, to have a slightly greater sense of quite how much they contribute, and quite how big a difference they make. And that mindset of recognizing that I'm a valuable team member, then what I would hope that creates into a much more equal discussion between, sort of people that are in the department making the decision and people that are contributing. Okay. And of course, that relies on you being a good doctor and being a good team player and making a difference and contributing. Yeah. And if I kind of think, maybe as a consultant, we haven't had sort of anybody that I would have said was a problem, but all of our doctors, they make a difference. They put their hand up, they put themselves forward. They're doing audits, they're doing research projects. They're all brilliant, sort of the international graduates that I work with. But if I kind of sort of say, if I imagine that sort of somebody who's not a team player, somebody who has complaints, somebody who doesn't put their hands up, somebody who never covers an on-call shift when somebody's dropped out, then that becomes a bit more problematic. Yeah. So if you're a good doctor, then it's much easier for you to think highly of yourself. So kind of that, I guess, that would be a starting point. The other thing that I'd say would be also then to think about long term, and I don't know sort of how visas work, but what I would mean by that is that I would imagine that there would be a period of time where one would have to accept that these are not great jobs and these are not this might not be a great role. It might not be what I want to be doing in the long term, but it's a stepping stone. And for me, that's not a bad thing. And certainly if I think when I did my training, so I graduated in 99, and our career paths were much, much longer than the career paths nowadays, and nobody knew what they wanted to do. Everybody traveled or went to Australia and did A&E, and then, people did the 3-year core surgery rotation, core medicine rotation. And then eventually people found themselves, and then you became a senior SHO for 18 months or 2 years, and then you became a registrar, I don't know, maybe 6 years after you graduated, something like that. Yeah. So the career pathways were much longer, and we were better doctors for it. Yeah. Because we did have a much broader experience. Yeah. Of course, that doesn't suit the government agenda, because the government wants consultants and GPs as quickly as possible. Yeah. And some doctors want to be consultants as GPs as quickly as possible. But the model that I went through, where we spent much longer as trainees doctors, we were better doctors than somebody who spends less as a trainee doctor. That won't be a shock. Yeah. And I guess sort of maybe one of the things for international graduates is that you have an opportunity to be a better doctor than somebody who is on that career treadmill, who's perhaps sort of a UK graduate. Because, the UK graduates, they're going to come on a career treadmill and they're going to go from one step to the next. So maybe one of the things that you have is you have an opportunity to be a better doctor, because you will accumulate a much greater degree of experience. But there might sort of be a little bit of acceptance in the beginning of your career that actually, sort of these jobs are not great, but it is thinking about, what's in it for the long term. I'm also sort of a big fan of thinking strategically. So, if I think for me, I would have enjoyed general practice. I would have enjoyed psychiatry. I would have enjoyed peds. I would have enjoyed gastro. I would have enjoyed lots of different things. I've ended up doing ENT, which I love, but, I would have liked to do lots of other things. So I don't believe there's just one career for most of us. Yeah. Now, there might be some of you there sort of thinking, I've only ever wanted to do knee surgery, and in my life revolves around knee surgery. And if I'm not a knee surgeon, the world will end. So I'm sure there are people out there that are like that. But I think majority of us, it's like, well, we want to make a difference, and it's okay. I can make a difference doing gastro. I can make a difference taking out tonsils. I can do psychiatry, general practice. It's all the same thing. It's all making a difference to people, isn't it? So I think I quite like the idea of thinking strategically about, where are the opportunities? Yeah. All careers in medicine are good, they're just different. Yeah. And if you have a very clear interest in a specialty, well, that's fine. Then you need to pursue that. But if you're early on in your career and you say, well, I want to be a doctor, but I don't know sort of which particular thing I want to do, then do whatever's easy. Yeah, why not? Why would you, if it's easy to get into specialty A and really difficult to get into specialty B, and you're not fussed, like, why would you do specialty B? Just do what's easy. Yeah, but there does need to be a little bit of thinking about what's easy in the short term versus what's easy in the long term. Yeah, because you might find that stuff that's easy in the short term might be difficult in the long term, and vice versa. So that kind of is something to think about. And I think you mentioned general practice. I think GPs work really, really hard at the moment. Probably much harder than certainly much harder than I work in my hospital role. So I think that's kind of a challenge. But equally, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said GP is a great career. You run your own practice, you run a business, you can spend money on whatever you want. And I would have said, in hospital, I have no power, I can't spend money, I have no budget. Everything I want to do has to go through 1,000 committees and takes 10 years. But if you're a GP principal, you can do whatever you want. You want to employ this stuff, you can do that. You want to put in a pharmacy, you can do that. So I would have said, GP, it's a great career because you run your own business. So 10 years ago, I would have said something completely different. So, in 10 years' time, general practice might again be a really great career. Whereas I think at the moment, GPs work really very hard.
Thank you. So many questions have come from that. I'm struggling to prioritize which one to ask first. But I think I'll digress slightly and then come back to some questions that came up from that. If one of the things, again, the decision making about training or going non-training routes and being, say, for example, just doing the Caesar pathway, which the name has changed this year. I'm not yet familiar with the new name, but the non-training routes and things like that. Do you have any thoughts about how to make that decision and how to make the most of that decision if you choose to go that way? Because, for example, in surgery, there's been a clear understanding that that SAS route hasn't been protected and people haven't been trained and given the same support as people who were in training or who are consultants. So do you have any thoughts? Have you had any experience with this?
So the Caesar route is really hard. It is not an easy route. So the going into training is much easier. So that would be the first thing. And I know. So in our department, we've had one doctor that's gone through the Caesar route successfully and achieved it. And we've got another 2 doctors that work in our department that are going for it at the moment. It is much, much harder. If you're a trainee, you step on a conveyor belt, everything's laid on for you. You know exactly what you need to do. You get checked every year. If you're not meeting your things, you get specific training and specific support. And at the end of, 6 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, you step off the conveyor belt and you have CCT. It is much, much easier. Yeah. Sort of the Caesar route, from what I've seen, is the first thing is how you structure your training, and I'm going to come back onto that in a minute. But the actual paperwork of proving that you've done the equivalent of everything, it is a mountain of paperwork and really, really detailed, close scrutiny. If you're training, you just turn up, they tell you this is what you need to achieve, and you achieve it, and you get signed off. And then next year, this is what you need to achieve, you achieve it, you get signed off. It's all structured and it all just happens. Whereas the Caesar route, it is all down to you. It's up to you to make it happen. It's up to you to provide that structure. So if you have a choice, I would go for training, because going down the Caesar route is much, much harder. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, some people struggle with the idea of training versus Caesar if they want to work less than full time. Yeah, because people say, I can be a trust grade doctor and work 50% of the time, and actually it's quite possible to do that as a trainee. So the argument of being less than full time in a non-training route, that doesn't stack up, because there are lots of trainees that are working part time. So if you want to work part time, still go for a training route. So that would be one thing, and then the other sort of argument that people talk about, the advantage of going down the trust grade route, is that you don't have to rotate through different hospitals. Okay. But that's a problem, and it's a problem because whether trainees like it or not, rotating through different hospitals, that is what makes you a good doctor. Yeah. So, and I know that it's disruptive to the family. I recognize all of that, but that is what makes you a good doctor. That is what makes you a consultant. The fact that you go and do different stuff, that's what makes you a good consultant. So, I did my undergraduate in Birmingham. I made a deliberate decision to move, and I moved from Birmingham to Leeds, and then I made a specific decision to move from Leeds to East Midlands, and I did my fellowship in Sydney. So for me, these were specific decisions to say I am leaving the region where I'm in because I want different experiences, and it is that makes you a good doctor. Yeah. So staying in the same hospital, that might be comfy, but that is not how you're going to be a good doctor. Yeah. So harsh reality check, I'm afraid. When it comes to Caesar application route, you have to have worked in different hospitals, because as a trainee you have to have worked in different hospitals, and you have to replicate the same for Caesar. So if you've just worked for 6 years, sort of as an ENT doctor or whatever in my hospital, that will not be sufficient for Caesar application, because you have to have worked in different departments. Yeah. So again, the argument that you can work in the same hospital and then do Caesar, it doesn't stack up. Number one, you're not going to be a good doctor if you spend all your time in the same hospital. You're not going to be a good consultant if you spend all your time in the same hospital. Not in my view. Number one. And then number two, you have to work in different hospitals in order to achieve Caesar. So if you've just been in the same hospital, you won't be meeting your Caesar requirements. Yeah, because there's a requirement that you work in different hospitals. When it comes to training, then I think it's interesting sort of to hear you say about how people are supported, because if I think for us, our locally employed sort of trust grade SAS group, they are treated the same as our trainees. Okay, so we have in our department, we have locally employed doctors that are on the registrar tier, and we have a series of registrar job plans, and they slot into a registrar job plan, and they have the same job plan as a registrar has. They have the same supervision as a registrar has, and they have the same hours as a registrar has. You probably ought to ask them as well, though, because maybe it's not quite as that. So I guess where the challenge is, they probably if we've got like 9 firms, for example, the people in training roles, they will get first pick of the firms. Okay. So, that may be where the difference is. If you're a local employed doctor in our department, you won't get first pick of the firms, because the first pick will go to people that are in the training roles. So I think that kind of where the difference is, but you're probably better off asking one of the people in my department whether that really is as rosy as I say that it is or not. If I think of, there's another hospital that I work with, so they don't have training registrars. And that's a very different model, because everybody that is on that sort of SAS locally employed tier, they are there purely in a service provision role. Okay, so and we have training registrars. If you're a locally employed doctor, you just slot into a training registrar role and you get treated as a trainee registrar. Okay, and the advantage of that is you rotate through the different firms, and you have the same job plan as a registrar, so 4 clinics, 4 theatre sessions, and 2 sessions of CPD. But the disadvantage is you probably don't get paid as much as an SAS doctor, because I think if you're an SAS doctor, you get paid more, and certainly out of hours you would get paid more, and you don't get stability because all the time you're rotating from one thing to another. So maybe if you're early on in your career, then maybe coming to a department like mine, when you get a registrar equivalent job, that's probably quite useful. But if you're a 50-year-old sort of trust grade doctor and sort of says, I just want to turn up and do the job, then you probably don't want to rotate every 6 months to work with a different consultant. You want to say, okay, you might say, fine, I'm an SAS doctor, my expertise is going to be thyroid surgery. And then you want to develop that as an expertise. Yeah. So, so that then you are a specialist in your own right, rather than somebody who's working in a training capacity. So the people that come to us, they might be early on in their career, they're training for the purposes of developing themselves into the Caesar route. But maybe, if you're an established specialist, then you don't want to be rotating through into a training post as sort of every 6 months. If you're a specialist, you want to establish yourself as a specialist doctor and, and develop your own practice rather than rotating. So, but I guess sort of maybe where the challenge is, if you're new sort of to the UK and you do want to learn, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you want to learn, you want to develop, you want to train, then you probably want to go into a department that will train you rather than a department that's going to give you, a very much a service level job, and you're just going to be doing on calls and service clinics, because that probably isn't training. Yeah. But I don't know, sort of, maybe you or other people on the call might know what other hospitals offer. I mean, I know what we offer in the 2 hospitals that I work in, and maybe that's not on offer everywhere. And perhaps if other people don't do what we offer, then for any consultants listening, you can sort of say, well, where Matt works, that's what they offer. I'm sure it's not perfect. If you ask our locally employed doctors, are going to say, right, is that what Mr. Daniel said? Yeah. So you might get an element of that if you ask them. But for those people that are consultants or GPs, sort of that are on the call or listen afterwards, you might sort of say, well, okay, this is what they do, and we have really high quality candidates. We don't struggle to recruit, but probably because we offer people a good job. Yeah, visas, there's still a problem. Yeah, but we offer people a good job, and we offer people training, and that's why we get high quality candidates. And and all of ours are really high quality candidates. And then maybe if somebody else is saying, oh, we're struggling to recruit, well, the consultants, the heads of service, they need to think, how do we create jobs that are going to be attractive? Yeah. And maybe what we've created is a way of working that's attractive. Yeah. The registrars like it as well, because instead of doing 1 in 5 on-call rota, they do a 1 in 9 on-call rota, because maybe we've got 6 registrars, 5 registrars, and then 3 or 4 locally employed doctors. So it's great for the registrars as well. So registrars benefit from it as well. So everybody benefits from it.
Yeah. I think that's really useful. Where I currently work, we have something quite similar, but there's always, because I spent quite a few years working as a locally employed doctor before I got into training. So I've tasted both sides of it, and there's always that sacrifice. Yeah. If anything needs to be done, then it falls on the locally employed doctors, which is fair enough based on training contracts and agreements and things. But that's a discussion for a different day. But thank you. That's very good, because I've spoken with quite a few people who've made the decision not to go into training. So there's on one hand, there's making the decision not to go into training. On the other hand, there's being unsuccessful at attempting to get into training. So I suppose the question would then be, if you're unsuccessful and you have this career plan, how do you manage that? How do you make sure? Because I did do a talk at some point about, if you're making that decision or if you're not getting into it, how do you make sure that from the start you're setting yourself up for success? But then you have far more experience. I'd like to hear from you what your thoughts are. If it's not possible, either by choice or unsuccessful attempts to get into training, what would be your principles for someone who's then having to go through the CSER route to make sure that they do it in the best way possible? So one of the things you've said is rotating through hospitals, but what are sort of other things? Because these are challenges that are unique to international medical graduates.
Yeah. So I'd say, the first thing, if I start with that not being successful at getting in, okay? So, for me, I think a lot of that's fixable. Yeah. Sort of, that requires skill, and it requires investment, and it requires hard work. And and maybe I'm more familiar with surgery than anything else, but if I think for surgery, there's a checklist. You know what you have to do. Yeah, you have to do so many audits, and you get so many points. You have to close a loop, you have to write a guideline, do service evaluation, write a paper, and you know exactly what you have to do. Yeah. And if I think for the people that I know that didn't manage to get into training, whether that's as international graduates or not, it's because they haven't done the work. Yeah. So I guess maybe the challenge for international graduates would be having the opportunities to do the work. Okay. Because, so if somebody comes and they're UK based doctors, and very early on, in your final year, your F1, they know I want to do surgery. So that means I have to do audit. So right in F1, they start looking at that. And in F2, they sort of say they start looking at that. Whereas if you're an international graduate and comes and says, right, I want to apply for core surgery, then, you know, you're probably going to be 3 years behind, because everybody else started to thinking about core surgery 3 years ago and started having a look at their checklist 3 years ago. Yeah. So the first thing that I would say would be that, you know, if you are wanting to get into training, but you've not been successful, you're probably going to be 2 or 3 years behind everybody else. Yeah. And what you need to do is you need to sort of say, okay, I'm 2 or 3 years behind. It's going to take me 2 or 3 years in order to get my portfolio up to scratch. But you know exactly what you need to do, because all the checklists are out there. Yeah. Sort of where to get the opportunities, I would say the opportunities are created by yourselves. Okay. And again, you know, if I kind of think the people that I work with, you know, if we do have an international graduates who puts their hand up, who's willing to do the weekend, who always covers the extra shift, if you come to me and sort of say, you know, I need to do a project and an audit, I'm quite likely to help you. Yeah, because I know that you work hard. I've noticed that you work hard. Yeah, of course you can tell me how hard you work as well. Yeah, so don't be afraid to come and tell me, sort of, tell me, oh, you know, I'm tired. Why are you tired? Oh, I covered the weekend. I think, right, okay, so you put your hand there, well done you, and sort of say, you know, oh, I'm tired today. Why are you tired? You know, oh, I sort of had to cover a late shift because so and so was ill. So don't be afraid to tell people how hard you work. Yeah, but if I know that you're working hard, if you come to me for help, I'm probably likely sort of to say yes. Okay, there's a bit of a challenge between where you work, because, you know, if you work in a big hospital, you're probably going to have more opportunities. If you work in a small hospital, you might sort of have fewer opportunities for those projects. Yeah, so that kind of might be a little bit of a challenge. Now, sort of, if you didn't get in, or you chose not to get in, and then you are working, if you sort of say, okay, you know, I didn't get into training, but I do want to get CCT and do Caesar, then I would say is start at the beginning. Yeah, because, you know, if you think the trainees right from the beginning, somebody's watching them like a hawk all the time. They have annual appraisals, and all the time they are working on their portfolio, and every year somebody checks to see, are you on track, what have you achieved. The problem with the Caesar route is that, you know, say, okay, you know, I didn't get in, or I chose not to, but I'm going to Caesar. You kind of say, well, you know, I'm going to start doing my portfolio in 5 years time. Yeah, you need to start doing your portfolio today. Yeah, you know, that's what the trainees do. So, you know, sign up to ISCP, you know, start collecting your WBA, make sure that you have, you know, so ISCP, that's for surgeons. Yeah, you know, whatever portfolio you're working to, sort of set up your portfolio.
I will give you.
Sorry, there's
I will give you. Now you're watching me.
Yeah. So sign up for that, and start working on your portfolio early on. So that would be my one tip. And then also, you know, think about what you need to do. Yeah. So if I think, I mean, I know ENT because that's what I do. So, you know, people are going to have to do head and neck cancer. And if you work in a small district general hospital, they don't do head and neck cancer. So, you know, you're not going to be able to do Caesar unless you walk away from the small district general hospital and you go and do somewhere that has cancer. And, you know, likewise, you know, cochlear implants, for example, you know, skull-based surgery, pediatric airway, district general hospitals don't do that. But you have to have ticked those boxes in order to do Caesar. Yeah. So if you just sort of stay, you might get a job in a small district general hospital. It might be very comfortable and very safe, but you will not get sufficient experiences. And even if you tick enough boxes on the portfolio to say that you can do that, when it comes to your exit exam, you know, if you haven't worked in a unit that does head and neck cancer surgery, you're not going to be able to answer the questions that relate to that. Or if you've not worked in a unit that has a PICU, you're not going to be able to talk about how you manage a child in PICU. Yeah, you know, speaking from my world. Yeah, so you need to think, okay, you know, what do I need to do? You know, which jobs do I need to do, and, you know, what boxes do I need to tick, but also what learning do I need to do. And my top tip really would be kind of to start right at the beginning, because, you know, the challenge that I've seen with the people going for Caesar route is that the mountain of paperwork is absolutely enormous. And you know, really, if you're going to be an ENT, you're going to be a trainee for 6 years. So I'd say if you're going to do Caesar, you need to collect your portfolio for 6 years, and you present it in 6 years' time. You might be able to do it a bit quicker, yeah. But you know, you're not going to do your portfolio in 6 months if a trainee has spent 6 years putting portfolio together, yeah. So, you know, it's going to take you years, and the sooner you start, the easier it is. And yeah.
Oh, that's really, really helpful. Thank you. This now, so having chosen a career, completed training, done your specialty, say you're at a point where, because burnout is a thing now in the world that is recognized, particularly in medicine. And one of the things that I don't even like to think about or talk about is doctors who've taken their own lives because of challenges that relate to work. If you find, how do you recognize in yourself that I'm at a point where things are not right and I need to do something? And what is that something that you would recommend people do?
I think that's very I think that's very individual. So I'll tell you how I recognize, yeah. So how I recognize that things are not going right for me is I'm not exercising, I'm not taking the dog for a walk or the dogs for a walk. I'm eating rubbish and I put weight on. So they would be how I recognize that sort of that my balance is wrong. And I think for everybody it will be different. So the other sort of signs that often would be that if there's a loss of motivation, yeah, sort of if you all of you will be incredibly motivated to have gotten where you are so far, yeah, because none of you would get where you are today without some real determination and some real motivation, yeah. So I would say if you find yourself thinking, why am I bothering? What's it for? That for me would be a sign of burnout, yeah. Because my guess is that isn't you, yeah. Because you didn't get where you are today by thinking, why am I bothering, yeah. So if you find yourself thinking, why am I bothering? What's the point? That for me would be a sign of burnout. Snappiness in the workplace, that would be a sign of workout. Not having time for patients, yeah. So I think certainly. That kind of also has happened to me, when kind of a patient comes in and I find myself getting frustrated, that for me would be a sign that that something is wrong, because, like, why am I getting frustrated with my patients and my colleagues? It's like, we're all just trying the best. So if I find myself getting frustrated at work, again, that for me would be a sign. And I think a lot for other people also. And and I think anger as well, a kind of uncontrolled anger, that would be a sign. I think it's very individual, because we all have different things. So recognizing it. I mean, there's questionnaires that you can do, sort of screening questionnaires. There's one called Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, and there's a whole sort of stack of other burnout screening questionnaires. You could do that if you wanted a check. So I suppose the other thing is, if your friends are kind of sort of say, Funke was staging an intervention and we're taking you for a weekend away, and you're thinking, okay, so that's a sign. But that travels two ways, yeah. So maybe, and often we don't recognize it in ourselves, yeah. So actually, one of the things that maybe we can do for each other, we can check in with each other, yeah. And again, I can kind of say, if I think, one of my work colleagues has sort of said, how are you doing? And I kind of thought, actually, I'm not doing very well, like sort of some patient related thing. And that was really useful, because my colleague asked me, how are you doing? And actually, how are you genuinely asked me, how are you doing? So I said, how are you doing, Matt? Not how are you doing? Oh, let's go over here. Because like we all sort of say, how are you today? I'm fine, goodbye. Yeah. My colleague said, how are you doing, Matt? And it was, like questions like that. And I kind of told my colleague, and that was really useful. And my colleague then sort of knew that something was troublesome for me, and and helped me. So maybe sometimes we don't see it ourselves, and maybe we owe it to each other, whether that's as friends, family members, or colleagues. We owe it to each other to sort of say, how are you doing? How are you really doing? Or as I say, in my case, when my friend sort of said to me several years ago that they're staging an intervention, I kind of thought, okay, I get the message. Because then often we don't know ourselves, do we? When we burnt out, when you're in the middle of that burnt out, you don't know it. So get used to signs. For me, I'm not taking the dogs out, I'm not exercising, I'm eating crap. That for me are signs that sort of something's not quite right. But then also maybe make it a habit of checking in on each other, because often people won't necessarily know themselves.
It's very helpful. So we're getting to a point where we should be wrapping up so we can ask questions. So I'd ask for your final thoughts.
So my final thoughts would be know your worth. Yeah, you are phenomenal to have. You are clearly, all of you are phenomenally driven, phenomenally achievement focused and phenomenally capable. And all of you contribute an enormous amount to the NHS. So I would say, don't let anybody put you down. Don't let anybody make you feel inadequate. Don't stand up for any abuse, and recognize that actually, you are doing a really, really important job. Yeah. So know your worth. Yeah. Even if other people don't, but your worth.
Thank you so much for that. That's really helpful.